And so I think my hope really was to try to recapture what that book did, because I think for a while, Mere Christianity was that one book you could hand kind of anyone. It was a multi-purpose book. You know someone who's not a Christian who wants to understand why this is not stupid, hand them Mere Christianity. You want your people at church to go deeper intellectually with what faith is, hand them Mere Christianity. It was kind of that one book that did all of it. And I think as a pastor and as a professor, I've been looking for that one book for our day and age. And I've struggled to find it. There's a few books that I thought might be contenders, but I kind of just got to the point where I was like, well, I'll write it myself, and not for anyone else. I don't.
Welcome to Grill Country. My guest again today is JD Lyonhart, who has been a guest here a couple times before. Today we're going to talk about his new book, The Journey to God in 6 Movements. Welcome, JD. It's good to have you back on Grill Country, as you've got yet another book out, and looking forward to talking about it with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure to be here. So yeah. I love your epic video background that you've got, that medieval type thing. I know you probably do video.
This. That's actually like a tapestry.
Oh, it's not like
that's real.
Oh no, I get that. Yeah. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes. It's actually not medieval. It's actually late 19th century piece by the Scottish symbolist John Duncan.
Okay.
The Riders of the Shee.
Either way, it's better than what I've got. So, which is just self-promotion, my own book in the background.
Well, hey,
so,
yeah. So this book is a little different. Let's quick dive right into it. This book is a little different than your previous books. You were here on the program before. We talked about your book Monotheism on the Trinity, which was a very philosophical book, although it was presented in the form of a dialogue and kind of accessible because of that. And then Space God, which was kind of you're just like playing around with a kind of a neat idea from the early modern period and seeing how far you could take it if you took it seriously. And this one it reads both as much more personal and somewhat more apologetic than your previous works. You want to talk about like what was your goal with this book? What did you hope to accomplish? Do you think you succeeded in accomplishing what you set out to do? And what inspired you to write this particular book?
Yeah, so it's hard because apologetics is such a loaded term. I don't know if it was like, here, I'm going to try to, give this to people to try to beat them into the faith. But I think this is why I believe. This is why I find this persuasive.
That's why I said personal and apologetic. It's like a personal apologetic of like, this is why I believe what I do.
This is why, this is how I came to believe. And just an attempt to give sort of the big picture of my worldview, I think. And also, I think this book was written for a different audience. The first 2 books were written for academics. They didn't read it either, but that was who it was written for. This book is more, a lot of these chapters started as sermons from my ministry days. And then they turned into lectures at my university, and now they became chapters in the book. So I think they're the lectures I do for my Intro to Christianity class, and it was meant to be one of those books that you can kind of hand anyone. I think in the background is Lewis's Mere Christianity.
Yeah, definitely. It has a lot of echoes of Mere Christianity, but it's definitely very much you at the same time.
Yeah, sort of like, I'm not claiming to have achieved that. It's more like this is a failed attempt to be a poor man's C.S. Lewis on crack. Like if C.S. Lewis was just raised on TV and Pulp Fiction and those types of things, this might be what and if he was dumber, then this might be something he would write. That's kind of what the hope was. So
but I think it's also, but the thing is, there's something about like there's a way in which maybe for a contemporary audience, a book like this might be more effective because of how personal and informal it is. I think that lands better with contemporary audiences than Lewis's approach does. in this day and age. But go ahead.
No, I think that's right. And I think, I mean, Mere Christianity was one of the first books I read when I started to take faith seriously. And it was actually hard to get into. The first time I didn't get a lot out of it because I just didn't resonate with it. But then I read it again and again and again. And eventually it was like, oh God, this is amazing. But I think you're right. There's a sense in which what Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, did for his age was fantastic. And that echoed for decades. But at this point, it's about 80 years old. If you're still using it in your intro to Christianity classes, in your discipleship groups at church, I think it's a lot of people aren't going to be able to get into it, not because it's not an amazing work, but because it's using different terminology. It's making different cultural references. It's written for a different time. I mean, these started as broadcasts during World War II. And so I think my hope really was to try to recapture what that book did, because I think for a while, Mere Christianity was that one book you could hand kind of anyone. It was a multi-purpose book. You know someone who's not a Christian who wants to understand why this is not stupid, hand them Mere Christianity. You want your people at church to go deeper intellectually with what faith is, hand them Mere Christianity. It was kind of that one book that did all of it. And I think as a pastor and as a professor, I've been looking for that one book for our day and age. And I've struggled to find it. There's a few books that I thought might be contenders, but I kind of just got to the point where I was like, well, I'll write it myself, and not for anyone else. I don't claim to have achieved that. So
you were consciously kind of set out. So you didn't. Then with this book, you were actually consciously had that in the background as kind of the model of what you were trying to do, as sort of a more contemporary version of what Mere Christianity tried to do. I think that's good. I think it lands, and I think one of the primary differences between what Lewis does in Mere Christianity and what you've done in this book is that the writing in this book is deeply personal. Like you tell a lot of your own experience, your own story throughout the course of this book, and that is a very contemporary, very modern kind of thing to do. Lewis was like much less personal. Lewis has other books where he is that personal, but Mere Christianity isn't one of them.
And only because he was tricked into journaling, and then they later published it, right? Well, and I think, it's modern, but I think, so the first two books I read as a Christian were Mere Christianity and Augustine's Confessions. And you might actually see that as because Augustine brings that personal dimension. Yeah, like, I was a sinner from birth, even when I was a child, and stealing the pears and stuff. And regardless of what you think of Augustine, I think, if you wed what C.S. Lewis was trying to do with a more contemporary, interior, personal approach, that's what I was trying to do. And again, I'm not claiming to have written the next Mere Christianity. I don't it's more just that was the dream. And you always set your sights high because you're going to fall short of those heights. But if you set them low, you'll fall short even of that. So that was the goal. I don't claim to have come anywhere near it, but that's what I was trying to do. And it works for me. It's that book I now hand people, but I don't know if it'll work for anyone else. So,
well, there's a long history of books that succeeded in being great in their own right that began as a model of something else. Like, Milton's Paradise Lost begins as a conscious model of the structure of the Aeneid. He's trying to write another Aeneid. And he ends up writing something that is great in its own right. So, I'll leave it to the reading audience to determine what they think of it on their own. But I rather enjoyed it, and I feel like I got to know you a little more in the process of reading it. So you laid it out in 6 movements. Do you want to talk about why you chose that structure, the 6 movements?
Yeah, so I think part of it was I wanted it to be story driven. I wanted it to be a deeply philosophical, scientific, historical book, but that didn't get bogged down in those details because, hey, we're telling a story. And part of that's my personal story, but also I wanted to kind of do the biblical story from beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation, and to help people understand the bigger picture of what they're talking about. Because if you go to church, you hear all these disconnected sermons, and you kind of try to piece together what your worldview and what the story is. But there's lots of people who have been in church for 80 years who still don't get the big picture of what the story is and how all the pieces fit together. They just have disconnected ethics, like, oh, be nice to people, and and Jesus loves you, but they don't see the big picture of how it all flows together. So I wanted to do that. So the 6 movements are creation, fall, nation, redemption, church, end. Creation, beginning of all things, and how does the story eschatologically end? And in creation, I explain, how does it all begin in Genesis? And then I get into what is a theology of creation? What do Christians believe about the world? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it dirty? Is it gross? Is the body and physical things evil or dirty or unreal? What's a Christian theology of creation? Like, I try to get into those questions. And then, of course, you can interrupt me. You look like you're about to interrupt me.
Oh, no. I'm still forming a thought. Go ahead, please continue.
So like, what's a Christian view of creation? Because I think that's being debated heavily right now, even if people don't quite realize I think that's been in the background for a while. And I think a lot of the differences as we enter this globalistic century, a lot of the differences are going to come down to, what do you think of creation, matter, the physical world, time and space, the body. And I think we kind of got to figure out what we think on that, because Christians have been very confused about the body and soul and whether the physical world matters or whether, screw it, let environmentalism, just screw environment. Who cares about Earth, right? We're all going to die and go to heaven. It's all going to burn. Like, these attitudes, we've got all these different attitudes, and I don't think people understand how they're consistent or inconsistent with their faith. So that's the first movement, is creation. The second movement is fall, where I explore, what does that mean? Does it mean we're evil? Does it mean we were good, but now we're evil? Is human nature good, bad, or in between? And I kind of get into those questions. Like, what are we? What am I? And I try to bring in that personal element, because it is personal. We're not just having an abstract discussion about human nature in the abstract. We're talking about whether I'm a dick or not. Like, do I have an optimistic or pessimistic view of myself and the world around me? Which is a very practical and immediately relevant question. I think especially in America right now, some people have absorbed such an optimism that any sort of pessimistic impulse is just like, no, come on, things are going to be fine. Are they? Is that the way the universe works? That things just sort of work out fine?
Yeah, I think there's a way. I don't think this is much of a stretch. I think people's basic view of human nature is kind of the thing that ends up forming their overall social and political outlook.
Yeah.
And like, you can predict people, you can often predict where people fall socially and politically based on what their view of human nature is. So
I think that's an interesting insight.
Yeah. So
I'm going to pretend it was mine and that's in the book and that I said what you just said. It wasn't. But no, I think there's definitely something.
Yeah. I'm actually, this is interesting. Maybe because my wife is Jewish and I'm a little bit of a theological weirdo too, but I kind of fall where young JD did in your narrative. I actually do think that we have an evil and a good inclination, and that our goal is to put the evil inclination in service of the good. We need to harness that evil inclination for the good. And because I'm a Christian and not a Jew, I think that's what Jesus does.
He harnesses the evil for the good? In the sense that, like, God sees evil as...
No, he makes it possible for us to harness our evil inclination and put it in service of the good.
Yeah.
Because he resets the cosmos. So we'll get into that. We'll get into where we differ later on, because we do differ.
But I mean, that's definitely true of podcasters. He's harnessing our egotistical desire to promote ourselves and to have everyone hear our voices, and he's using it for the kingdom, right?
Yes.
So,
by the way, you can find JD on the Spiritually Incorrect podcast.
Hey, thank you for pitching me. So I don't have to do so, but I'll still do it throughout the episode. But thank you for, we do the Spiritually Incorrect. Yeah, I wasn't making fun of him as a podcaster. I podcast with the Spiritually Incorrect podcast. So yeah, making fun of myself as well. But yeah, so that's the second movement, fall. Yeah. And then the third movement is nation. And we actually, in the book, we really camp out on it. I think there's like 5 or 6 chapters in that one because people often jump from fall to redemption from the book of Genesis. Then they skip the next, 800 pages to the New Testament. And I didn't want to do that.
That's what I do. This is, I think, an interesting, because we talked about the kind of resemblance to Mere Christianity. I think this is an area where it differs. Like in Lewis's book, I think like a lot of the biblical story and the gospel story, I think Lewis in his day and age could just safely assume that you knew it, right? You just knew it from your education in that day and age. You knew it regardless of whether you were a Christian or not. You had been exposed to it at some point. So the chances that you didn't know the story at all were 0. So this is why I think your choice to actually tell the story and tell it from the very beginning until the very end is actually a move that you need to make because the age that you're speaking to doesn't necessarily have that context automatically. And so you need to provide it in case they don't.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but it makes it sound like I was super intentional and like brilliantly did this to meet the needs of the age. So I'm here for it. Thank you, Grail Country. I'll take that. I think you're spot on. The people outside of the church don't know the story, and people even inside don't know the story because even though they go to church, it's no longer the air that they breathe everywhere else in the way that it used to be. So I think that's a brilliant thing you've pointed out. It's just really wise of me to do it this way. No, I'm just.
I mean, even if you didn't do it consciously, I think subconsciously you could have been doing it subconsciously because part of your brain, like even if you didn't consciously think, "Wow, in this day and age that I live in, people don't necessarily know the gospel, so I better actually figure out a way to like work the story." And not only that, I should probably show how the gospel flows out of the previous story that was happening in the rest of the Bible. Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to have consciously thought that to have somehow like intuited that it was a necessary move to make on some level.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Sorry. And if people aren't used to me, I turn everything into a joke. I think the second one there, maybe it sounded like I was really like bragging about myself, which I'll subtly do, but as a joke so that I can later claim I was just joking. But yeah, I think I spent a lot of time in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures, and I think you're right. I don't think the rest of the story is understandable without it. I don't think we understand how how insane what Jesus was saying was, unless we understand the context in which he said it. And so we spend a bunch of chapters on that. And I think that's really where I try to establish this Jewish view of monotheism, of a God who isn't an idol, who somehow isn't created or finite in the way that other gods are, but is somehow above that, not just the most powerful amongst the created beings, but the creator himself, the one who is being, goodness, truth, beauty, justice itself, not just a being within the world, but the one who grounds the very qualities, the moral, aesthetic, and elethic qualities of existence. And then that really does set up the fourth movement, redemption, which is, this I am God of being, truth, justice, goodness itself enters in to the created universe. And what does that mean? And how is that different from just saying, oh, Pharaoh's the son of God, or some sort of messenger? What is he claiming when he says I am that's somehow unique? And so that transitions into movement 4, redemption. And then I get into sort of the traditional, what did Jesus's life and death and resurrection accomplish? And discuss different views about that. And I try to, people get into substitutionary atonement, ransom theory, all the different theories. I try to not force you to have to pick one, but I do try to say there's something that has to be done here. And I think what Jesus does has something to do with judgment and justice.
You seem to lean into a kind of a substitutionary atonement that's not necessarily penal. I would that's the overall impression. Like, correct, if I'm wrong about that, please correct me. But that was the sense I got as I was reading it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's an interesting way to frame it. I think if someone's imagining God is this entity who's just making free choices and he could just choose whether to punish us or not, which I think is a lot of what substitutionary atonement feels like, is God could choose not to punish us, but then he chooses to punish us because he thinks that's the wisest decision. And that feels erratic and terrifying. But once you understand that God is absolute, and if God is the absolute ground of all things, moral values like justice can only be objective if they're grounded in one who is justice itself and goodness itself. Once you understand that, I think these questions around justice and judgment for the oppressor, but also liberation for the oppressed, I think those become almost unavoidable. We have to find some way to deal with justice. And I think the cross deals with that in some way or other, and we can disagree on the details, but I think it does something there that if it hadn't been done, we'd be screwed. Mm-hmm. And we can disagree on the details, but yeah.
No, I don't think it's worthwhile. Not for a book. I don't think it's worthwhile to get into the nitty-gritty on the details because, first of all, because of how personal this book is, because this is just you processing how you are receiving the story, and the way you've written it, it's like there's very much I can see like this is your like kind of gut level reaction as you're trying to process the meaning of the story. And so I don't think that I don't think you're doing the kind of like I don't see you doing the kind of theology here where I would even think it would be appropriate to kind of pick it apart and try to like nail you down on a particular position, because it's not the spirit of what you do. It's just not the spirit of what you're doing.
Yeah.
No. You're not really making any like absolute claims like this is the correct theory of atonement that I'm presenting right here, right now in this book. No, you're not. You're just like, yeah, I think the way you expressed it is like the cross does something, and this is your way of trying to explain what you see the cross is accomplishing. Yeah.
I love how you're framing all this stuff. I should get you on the publishing team. This is great. You're making me like the book more. I love it. So, and I mean, that might sound arrogant, but I'm just like appreciative because you read it. It sounds like you read it deeply, and that means a lot to me.
I try to read things carefully, and I also try to read things, at least on the first read, to read them sympathetically. I try to avoid as much as possible, like trying to like think about like what I would have said or what I would think differently, and just try to take it as it is. And then only on like on a second or third read will I approach the text critically. That's just I just think that's fair. It's just it's the only way to be fair to the author.
That's a lovely practice.
So,
and it also forces you to read all of my books 2 or 3 times before you're mean to me. So,
yeah, right.
And I'm fine with that. You know,
if I read it again between now and so JD and I recently agreed that he was going to come and join me in North Carolina this October at Southeastuary. Tickets are on sale now. There will be a link to Southeastuary tickets in the description, and we're very pleased to have JD joining us for our Southeastuary conference at Lake Junaluska, North Carolina, here in October. And I don't think JD has any idea exactly what I've got him into, what I've roped him into. But I'm gracious that he accepted the invitation, and looking forward to that.
I'm excited. Free food, free lodging. It's awesome. So I'm down. I mean, and maybe I'll have a conversation with a few people while I'm there.
Yeah, we're not even asking you to do a monologue presentation, because we decided decided in advance that for this particular conference we wanted to have a series of dialogues. So you'll just be paired up with some other folks and brought into dialogue. The theme of the conference is Even So Come. Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So I hope to see audience members there. Hey.
Yeah, so. You will. You'll get to meet some Grail Country audience members for sure. All right. We talked about so far you've gotten to movement 3, right? And then I kind of sidetracked you.
We did movement 4, redemption.
Between 3 and 4, right? We were kind of in between 3 and 4. Is there anything? Do you want to backtrack into anything, since we kind of just passed over it really quickly? Is there anything more that you want to say about movement 3, or shall we proceed on?
I think we sort of were starting to make the pivot to movement 4. We got into some of the atonement stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd say movement 4 has the longest chapter in the book, just retelling the story of Jesus from beginning to end like a narrative.
Yes.
Which is something I think we need to do more of. And honestly, that was the easiest thing I've ever written. It was the easiest, but it was also the best writing experience I've ever had. People in church always say, stay close to Jesus, like spend time with Jesus. And I think this process, I don't know what's appropriate with your audience members, but after I wrote it, I just left thinking Jesus is the baddest motherfucker of all time. Sorry, you can edit that out if you want. And I'm not, whether or not you like swearing or don't like swearing, that I don't know how to pare that reaction down. That was my reaction, I am in awe of this man.
Let's get into that. Why that reaction? Do you want to, let's get into that.
I love the ways that he meets the needs that I have and the needs of our time, and so directly, like he's doing all the stuff we need to be doing, and it's so immediately relevant. And yet at the same time, he doesn't just feel like a projection of me or like a creation of our time or even like a human creation back then. He feels other. He feels like he's here with a mission that I can't quite understand. And he's doing things that are terrifying and confusing, and he's flipping over tables. He's somehow, I don't want to say he's a revolutionary, because I think that's a loaded thing, but he's perhaps the ideal that the revolutionaries failed to reach because they got confused with other things. He's just...
Well, quite specific. Pretty much, he refuses the call to be a revolutionary. That's kind of like why. That's why Judas betrays him.
Yeah, I think I'm not saying he's a political revolutionary. Right. I just,
correct.
I would say a political revolutionary in many cases it's not that he's not them; it's that they've failed to live up to him. Is maybe what I would say. But whatever is good and beautiful...
I would say that political revolutionary isn't quite radical enough to explain what's going on with Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
He's an ontological revolutionary.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. I love it. Yes. No, that's exactly right. An ontological revolutionary, because he's not just changing the political system does not change our underlying reality that causes things to go bad with whatever political system we put in place. That just causes there to be another revolution in the future, right?
Yeah.
He's going deeper than that. And yes, it's an ontological revolution. He is calling us into a different reality altogether.
Yeah.
Than the one that we've known up to this point.
He's just... I think I'd always parroted that, like I'd always sort of course, as a Christian, you have to, say something along the lines of Jesus is somehow different or more significant than other things that I might identify by. And I think I'd parroted that. And I could have abstractly said, without the cross, so of course he's essential. But I think just encountering him in this writing process as an entity, as a relationship, and not just as some task that he achieved, but like actually, it was just a very powerful experience for me.
Well, also, there's the way you've written that section where you're retelling the story. There's very much a way where the reader can see that you kind of are projecting yourself into it and very much trying to look at it as if you were in that story, and which is why you're able to make these, very personal to you kind of observations, because you're making that effort to put yourself into the context of the story. And that changes the nature of the story, right? Because then you're not just reading a story about events and things that happened to a group of people a long time ago and very far away. You're imagining how they're relevant to you where you are right now.
Yeah.
And that's a very different kind of way of reading.
No, I definitely think so. And I think there will be people who nitpick about details like, oh, he used this word and that's not the technical, or like this event actually happened before this one. But I think you're right. Like for me, I grew up and my first love was movies and TV. I love movies, and I wrote it like a movie. And a movie, if it's true to the spirit of the book, it doesn't have to maintain all the details correctly. It just needs to get the spirit of it correctly, right? And I think that was it to some extent. Like I was retelling things cinematically because I almost wanted to film Jesus.
Right.
And maybe the scripture verse I quoted here, he actually said earlier in the story, not at this point. But it's like this is the cinematic depiction for the cinematic age, right?
Yeah. And I think even though things may not be in the exact order, I think things that you're trying to link together are properly linked together, even if they are different, even if they are actually sequential in the text. And I think that the cinematic thing is right, because I think that the talking about it cinematically is another way of talking about what I was talking about, whereas it's kind of an imaginal exercise, because in cinema, the audience is seeing through the perspective of the camera. So in presenting things cinematically, what you're doing is you're inviting the audience to enter directly into the story with you. So
I like that.
Yeah.
So that's movement 4.
That's movement 4.
And then movement 5 is church. And
somehow we ended up with a church.
And I think that was really because you could imagine the story just ending at movement 4 and going straight to end, right?
Yeah.
Like why is there this sort of waiting room of church history from Jesus coming to him coming again? What is needing to be accomplished there? And I think a lot of people tell the story in a way that I'm not entirely sure there is anything that in their version of the story needs to be accomplished there. And so if someone asks, well, why isn't heaven on earth right now? I think a lot of us would just say, I don't know. And so I think movement 5 is really an attempt to figure out like why hasn't the end come? What is being accomplished here? And also to wrestle with the nature of what's the relationship between community and individual, especially with a history where the community has just been so horrible at times to the individuals and tried to homogenize and suppress them. And so what's the proper relationship there? And I get into the Trinity some as well, because for me, human relationship, self and other, community and individual are grounded ontologically, there's that word again, in the Trinity, who's at the heart of all existence, the one who is three, the three who are one, who are both a community and an individual. And so I think to really bear the image of God on earth is not just to have an individual relationship with God, but a communal one, because we're in the image of one who's both an individual and a community. And I think that relationship's essential. I don't know if it has to look exactly like, oh, we meet in a church building, but I think spiritual friendship, spiritual community, I don't think there's a lot of thinkers today that talk about the spiritual journey as deeply personal, and it is, but it's not only that. And I think in a very individualistic modern world, I think we've lost a lot of that emphasis that the church was supposed to be. And that's throughout the whole scripture, because the scripture is it's about Abraham's family, then it's about the nation, right? Like, these are very communal texts, and we read them from a very modern individualistic perspective at our peril. So, and that's not to say the individual and the personal isn't in the stories or texts. It's just that they're always in tension with the communal, because that's what the Trinity is, the tension between the communal and the individual, right? So, yeah.
So why do you think, okay, here's the thing. Why do you think historically that the church age has been marked by an increase of individualism? The age prior to the church was much more community focused than the church age has been. In classical antiquity, people were far less individualistic than they are now. So under the influence of Christianity and the church, we've become more individualistic. So why is that, and what balance is it that we need to strike before things get better?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you ask. I don't know who's right, but I mean, if you're talking to a Catholic, the Protestant Reformations, where the individual.
Let's try to make this as non-sectarian as possible.
but even if I'm even as a Protestant, I can recognize that at least part of that comes back to the Protestant Reformation. Sure. That the individual can sort of strike out on their own, question the community. And not only that Luther did it, but what he was saying, that we don't need the priesthood and community to mediate our relationship with God, because you can have that sort of one-to-one yourself, the priesthood of all believers. I don't need to go through a medium of community to access the divine. I can have that on my own. I can read the Bible for myself in German. Luther translates the Bible into popular German, the language of the people, so that the people can actually read in their own language on their own. They don't need to go through the church. And so the individuals really emphasize there in a new way. And I think that there's something going on there that sidesteps the traditional communal structures, both like practically speaking, we don't, but also just ideologically. So I think there's the birth of the modern individual there. And we still have the mediation, but I think in the modern Protestant age, Scripture has become the mediator instead of the church, right? Like sola scriptura, go and read the Bible on your own every day. That's individualistic, but it's maybe replacing the church with Scripture. And so the communal has been replaced by something that the individual can now just do on their own. And the printing press is not inconsequential to this story, because it's coming, I think, early, mid 1400s, right before the Protestant Reformation. Not only does the printing press allow the Protestant Reformation to expand its message widely, it means that now books can be read alone at home, that you're hearing Scripture, you're not seeing it on the walls at church or discussing it in communal settings. You can just go read it alone, and you can have your own personal Bible time. Those are very individualistic sentiments. So I think there's multiple different things you could argue are to blame, and I don't even know which ones of those are right. I think the Protestant piece is a piece, though. So I think maybe it was a necessary balance. I think maybe the individual needed to be scalpeled out from the community.
Well,
but I think if we then go to the other extreme of absolutizing the individual, then that's problematic as well. Like they need to be in tension, right? Because the Trinity isn't one or three, it's both, right? Like,
right.
so.
Well, yeah, I consider myself a personalist, and the whole point of personalism is actually to find a kind of a middle way between collectivism and atomized individualism. That's the entire point of personalism. And the reality is that we really can't. We cannot live without either the idea of the inherent dignity and worth of every single individual human, or that we are by nature beings that exist in relationship and community. And we have to hold both at the same time in tension. And I actually do think that your previous work on the Trinity is probably the best place to start looking for the proper way to balance, right? Like, because like I think that's why. I mean, I don't think Christianity is Trinitarian just randomly because somebody thought it was really cool to have this really weird idea that something is somehow one and three at the same time. It's actually teaching us something very fundamental about what it's like to be a person at all, because to be a person is always to be at the same time both one and part of a group, a collective that is embedded into other higher things beyond itself. That's just the nature of personal existence at all. Like you can't have a person that is not embedded in community and relationship. No such thing exists. But at the same time, we don't ever want to lose sight of the inherent, the essentially infinite value and worth of even the single individual person.
Yeah.
So yeah,
got to do both of those things at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, and
so yeah. So I think that I would say that I actually am not that pessimistic about how the arc is gone. I think that if you look back at, well, okay, let's take a look at one of the well-known Bible stories that you relate in your book is the parable of the Good Samaritan. Where did the Good Samaritan get the motivation to act as he did? Because from a purely communal contextual basis, there's no explanation for his behavior.
Yeah. So he as an individual is sort of striking.
He can only do what he does because he is radically acting as an individual in accordance with something, with a higher person. Essentially what I'm saying is that it is an action that can only be motivated by the Holy Spirit, because there is no cultural contextual explanation for his behavior.
Yeah, he's standing almost like Kierkegaard as an individual breaking from the group to say, no, I'm going to go take care of this guy, even though that's not what communally my people do. And yet, as individualistic and breaking apart from the group as that is, he's doing it for the sake of the other.
Correct.
To take care of the other. And so again,
so he's actually doing it in service of a higher and greater notion of community than the one that is given to him.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is it's really easy to emphasize the community. It's really easy to emphasize the individual. And I think church history swings back and forth between those extremes and doing it in one, or we mix and match it. But I think the goal is to hold those things always in tension. And I think you're 100% right. Like, I would say I'm, a personalist as well, but in tension with all these other things. And when it comes to the Trinity, there's this whole discussion right now, right? Like, are they reflected? Is the Trinitarian Imago Dei reflected in church community and relationships and persons, or is it genuinely other from that? And I'm just kind of like, it's both, people. Like, what are we talking about? The whole thing's a paradox. Like, and that's the paradox we should have expected, because if you get into ontology, you realize all these paradoxes are inescapable. Like, this is just the world we've been given that's torn between these paradoxes. personal and communal, absolute and particular, like time and timelessness. You're not, it's both.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think Christians, I think, are uniquely suited to face that kind of fundamental paradox, because when we begin with Jesus as our axiom, we're already in the realm of paradox, because everything about Jesus is paradoxical to begin with.
100%.
So
yeah, and I think if you accept that, like, how did the divine and human work together in Jesus? How can God be one and three? I can't make sense of those things, to be honest. But once I accept them, they then allow me to make sense of everything else.
Yep.
And I think there's other people who try to have a deeply rational ontology, and then they can't make sense of reality.
Right.
And I think, and I would just say, there's something about God that I can't understand. But once I accept him as he's presented himself in Jesus, I can then understand everything else in his light. And that's a very C.S. Lewis thing. Not merely that I look at the sun, but that by it, I see everything else.
But we can't even understand even our own experience of being persons is essentially incomprehensible. This is why this is why consciousness is the hard problem, because the reality is that our experience of person, even our finite person, is in a kind of a technical sense, is also beyond being, because we have no experience of being as human persons that is not mediated through our personhood. There's no possibility of removing ourselves from the equation, and so the most fundamental part of ourselves, the I itself, is beyond being by its nature.
That's interesting, beyond being. But I mean, we can get into that debate about beyond being, but I think that you're right, that sometimes we assume that all the things that are down here, we kind of understand. And then we use our brains down here to then go and discover the mysteries and uncover them. But no, this is all still mysterious. We haven't figured any of this out. And whatever mysteries we're encountering in the cosmos, we're encountering in ourselves as well.
Right.
And as you said, I mean, if we're accessing the cosmos through ourselves, is it even logically possible that the paradoxes out there wouldn't be lining up in some way with those within? Because how can a paradoxical self access a world without paradoxicaling it? Like it would have to somehow be bound up in the story, right? So
we've gone through the first 5 movements, right? So we just talked about, so that leads us to movement 6, which is the end. So tell us how the story ends.
The short answer is I don't know. But I would say I have 2 chapters in the book on this. The first one deals with eschatology. And for me, gosh, what did I even say in that? I don't no, but I think the first thing is, I think we need to stop trying to figure out how and when it is going to end, and more just start living out of the fact that it is going to end, that this journey will eventually come to an end. And so instead of trying to figure out when the world is going to end, we should start living like it's going to end and living out of that knowledge. And that's a rebuke of a lot of eschatology out there today. But then I also try to explain the role that eschatology plays in Christian faith. The now and the not yet, the hope for the sense that the kingdom has begun here and now. Like, we're not just waiting for it to start and don't kill yourself if that's the case, right? No, it's begun here and now, and it's getting bigger and bigger, but it's not going to be fully fleshed out into the end. And so our senses of longing, our senses of incompleteness, like, those are correct senses, and they're not to be escaped totally. They're to be tempered by joy and beauty and goodness here and now, because eternity is breaking in here and now. But I an interesting one that I often think about is, I think a lot of people get to middle age and then they realize, oh, I haven't done all the things I wanted to do. and they were expecting eternity to somehow, like they were expecting they would get to a point where now things were good fully, and I don't think you get there. I think you might get to satisfaction amidst all the problems and chaos, but I don't think on earth we fully arrive at heaven. And so there's this whole discussion of different views of eschatology, and I try to make it practical and relatable. And I think it gets political even, because I think everyone has an eschatology, even if they're not thinking about it. And a lot of our worldviews are functioning out of that.
I would agree with you. I think that necessarily follows, even if you are furiously insisting you don't have an eschatology, there's a way that that you still have it. That's still a position.
Yeah.
And it's just defined negatively. So, and even if your eschatology is the heat death of the universe, it's an eschatology.
Yeah, it totally is. And I mean, you see that in Annie Hall, right? Like, there's no, I don't even know if we're allowed to talk about Woody Allen anymore. Tell me later. But there's a sense in which even the non-religious person is haunted by their eschatology. Right? Like the little boy in Annie Hall who's just can't get past the fact that the universe will eventually die. And his mother's saying, "What is that to you?" And he's like, "Well, how could it not? It frames the whole universe in which I exist." And so it's not religious. And I try not to get too technical, but I even get into this discussion about Marxism and capitalism, because these are eschatologies, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot about Marxism that needs to be rejected. But also in that, Christians have gone so far this other way that we've lost sight of some of the things about our eschatology that Marx actually had right. And, right. So it's trying to find these balances and realizing that this is all important because, in America right now, I think you're in America, right? Mm-hmm. These conversations are inescapably almost every discussion, whether it's tariffs, taxes, it's all related to these questions about capitalism and communism. And eschatologies are being brought into all of our daily lives constantly, and people just aren't aware of them. So, yeah.
So how do you see what is your version of how the story ends?
So I think, in that chapter, I emphasize that it will be a day of justice because I believe God is justice itself. I think we often focus on justice solely as for the oppressor, like Hitler's going to suffer, but it's also for the oppressed. Social justice. God will make right all things, wipe away every tear. So the end of the day is a day of justice. And for many, that's hopeful. But I think most of us are pretty screwed up, even though we have flickers of beauty and goodness within us because we're made in the divine image. I think a day of justice is scary for us, and that makes sense that it would be. But it's also a day of hope and forgiveness. And I think the end of the world is often depicted as this terrifying thing, right? Left behind, everyone's but it's actually meant to be a day of hope, a day when what ought to be finally is, when heaven finally comes down to earth and time and eternity meet, and what should be actually is. It's the vision at the end of Les Mis when instead of dying, the people on the barricade stand atop of it in triumph, and Jean Valjean is with Cosette. The family is back together with the mom who died, and it's a vision it's a hopeful vision, not just a scary vision. And then the final chapter gets into heaven and hell. And that might be more of what you're really getting at there, because that's the sexy topic, universalism, like where are we all ending up? And I don't take a position in that chapter. I try to give as elegant a defense I can of why one might accept any of the positions. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but if viewers want to hear more on that, I'm happy to talk about it now, but we also, on my podcast, the Spiritually Incorrect podcast, we just had last week, Jordan Wood came on to talk about universalism. This upcoming Tuesday, James Dominic Rooney is talking about traditional hell. on the show, and then we're having David Artman to come and process the whole thing. So I've some of my views are more there as well, but
all right. So you're having Rooney on right after Jordan, huh?
Oh yeah, we hold nothing back. It's the worst, the most terrifying proponents of each side. No, but yeah, get both of those guys on there. So why not?
Yeah. The only thing I have, like, Rooney's position is bizarre because it's so curiously modern and not traditional. You know what I'm saying? It's not traditional Catholic argument at all. It's very much in debt to C.S. Lewis, and is unthinkable absent the work of C.S. Lewis, and it isn't the traditional Catholic case at all. So it's very interesting. So I don't want to. You've got your own podcast, and you're going to be talking about it there. So I'll leave you to, and you're giving a fair hearing to all sides, and I think that's like I think that's the most that we can ask for, because none of us really actually knows for sure how the story is going to end, and I don't either. Just taking our best guess.
Yeah, so. I think Christians. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's okay. It's fine.
I think Christians. Yeah, I think this is a much more open discussion than people think, for sure, because it hasn't happened yet, right? You want to be hesitant about that, but also, so we had R. Zachary Manis on the show because this is our second time covering the end of the world stuff. Like a few years ago, we had on Robin Perry, and we also had R. Zachary Manis, who defends a traditional hell, and not just a traditional hell, a traditional fiery hell. So like he's taking that position, but he said something that's really stuck with me, which is that he actually thinks if he were just reading scripture as scripture alone, which you can't really do, but if he were just going to take scripture alone, he says he would actually not take the traditional hell position. He thinks annihilationism is the strongest position. And then he said, if you're going to go to philosophy, universalism is the strongest position. The only reason, he then said, why he takes the position he does is because he believes deeply in communal authority and tradition. And he believes the tradition, while not unanimous, has consistently throughout church history taken the traditional conscious torment view. And so that's why he takes it, because he doesn't just read the Bible on his own. He reads it with the tradition. And that was an incredibly honest thing for him to say. But it also stuck with me that like most Christians don't have that nuanced with the tradition thing. Most Christians just think the Bible requires one of those positions.
He's cherry picking though too, because it's like, well, okay, it's not like that view is not univocal throughout the tradition.
Oh yeah, I don't
at all. And so like it's not as if it's not a choice. I think he's sounds to me like I can probably point to exactly who in the tradition he's prioritizing. And I'm guessing he's Catholic.
I don't think so.
Oh, really?
I think he might. Well, I'd have to double check that, which makes it more weird. But
because that seems like that seems like a Thomas move to me.
I can see that. And the point of me bringing that up wasn't to emphasize that he's right about the tradition. I think it's more to emphasize that even the people defending the traditional hell are starting to admit that scripture doesn't require the views that you think it does as explicitly as you think it does. And you can make a move to tradition and we can have that argument. But I think for a lot of evangelicals, for example, they're like, scripture is damning you to an eternal fiery torment. And I think even some of the better defenders of that traditional view are starting to admit it's more complicated.
Yeah, I think the idea that annihilationism has the strongest exegetical case is pretty widely accepted at this point. I just don't think that annihilationism is coherent.
Yeah,
I don't think it's not philosophically coherent. That's the problem.
So it sounds like you're a universalist. Is that right?
I very, very much well known that I am. I'm not. You're not outing me. I'm actually somewhat unusual though, because unlike most of the universalists that you'll talk to, I actually never was not a universalist.
You started that way. Yeah.
I began as a Universalist. And then I stopped being a Christian because I was basically led to believe that my views were unacceptable. And so I went it only as Universalism has begun to gather steam have I made my way back toward regular church attendance. Because I was kind of like on my own out on an island for a very long time because I was convicted from very early childhood. And the necessary that universalism was necessarily the case. Pretty much when I was 5, and my evangelical parents told me that my grandfather was going to hell because even though he believed in God, he didn't believe in God in precisely the way that they thought that he should. I kind of called bullshit on that story from that age. And so I've always been a Universalist since I was a child. So.
You guys are on me right now. I love it. Not you specifically.
I don't
feel like
here's the thing. Unlike people who have been convinced of the universalism and have a lot of baggage from their past, I don't have any strong need to like convince anybody.
Oh yeah, no, I was not saying you were being aggressive. You aren't at all. You're being lovely about it, and I appreciate the story. It's just that literally before I got on here, I was emailing back and forth with David Artman.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I was on the Grace Saves All podcast last week, and he's coming on our show. And then after I was on that podcast, Jordan Wood started messaging me about it, and now we're talking about it. And so I'm like, oh God, like I'm every angle I'm getting universalized from, and I'm here for it. I'm not like angry about it. I'm like, okay, let's do this.
I have two caveats, JD. Like I don't disagree with you about the importance of justice, and so. I think a lot of people just like when they're trying to give a shorthand version of what Universalists believe, they'll say that we don't believe in hell. That's not true.
No,
Universalists do not believe in an eternal hell. I'm actually a maximalist when it comes to the population of hell, even though I'm a Universalist. I think most people have a lot of refining fire to go through before they're ready to be in the presence of God. And I'm not, and I am not soft about divine justice. And the other thing is that I also have a caveat when it comes to myself. It is not I will defend my confidence in the salvation of every soul other than my own. But the fate of my own soul by necessity, has to remain a mystery to me, to be worked out in my life and to the best of my ability to try to do what's right. So
that's a beautiful thought. I love that. And it actually, I wrote a poetic version of Dante's Inferno for a modern time once that I've just never bothered to revise for publication because the rhymes are too abominable. But I'll just put it through ChatGPT and it'll fix it. But I put all these people in hell. I put Trump in hell. I put, and then at the end, I was trying to figure out how to end it. And I was like, the only possible way to end this is to put myself in hell as well for daring to write this and condemn other people. And I felt like that was the only, and that ends with a non-end, because then is everyone in hell or no one? Or, it was just, it was meant to be confusing and to point out the complexities in the whole theory and thing, right? Like, and not resolve them, but just uncomfortably do them. Because once you condemn other people, you're held to that by your own words. And I don't know if I can survive my condemnations of others. And so.
No, that's good. And also that reminds me of like one of the parts of your fourth movement. And the reason I said that that it feels like that the kind of theory of atonement that you want to lean into is substitutionary, but not necessarily penal. Because I don't remember exactly the way you worded it, but you talked about it as like, as what Christ does on the cross is like God coming into our story and bearing the suffering on our behalf, right? Now that is definitely substitutionary, but it's not necessarily penal in nature. And it actually is connected to the way you talk about empathy in the book as well, right? So God enters incarnates into our reality, and in the ultimate act of empathy, he is crucified, and suffers for us, and not just for us, but actually for the restoration of the entire cosmos. And it's not how that mechanically works is actually less important than what it means about what kind of God we're talking about that would do that for us.
Yeah.
And
I think go ahead.
And I think the kind of God that would do that for us is simply just, it's not the kind of God who I think would infinitely punish us for finite sins. I just don't think that's likely. But at the same time, humility requires me to leave the question of my own salvation a mystery, even though I may be confident that God will redeem every other soul. Yeah. So
I think there's a lot of interesting things there, and a lot of beauty in that. I think that might be a nice way that you put it. Substitutionary, but not penal. Because I think the penal makes God feel too much like a judge, too much like Zeus deciding I'm going to be a dick to you or not. And I think there's more of if God's justice itself, whatever we bend has to just bend back. And it's not declared like by a voice who has to decide so much as it's just whatever justice is. And I think, and if the legal penalty for sin is just an image, because it's not the reality itself, it's just our attempt to get at it with an image, then why not the image of God just swallowing all the darkness at the cross? And that I think the problem comes when people try to say, but what does that actually mean when you get beyond the image to what it's pointing to? And it's like, well, you never get beyond images with any of these theories. So why not just
we're just talking to Jordan. If you start looking at this in light of Jordan's work, where Jordan is like following Maximus and taking quite seriously the idea that creation is incarnation and that creation happens at the cross. It's like this act of ultimate self-sacrifice and empathy that is just like that's so great it's beyond our comprehension.
Yeah,
is what creates the world.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think the issue for universalism is how can it make sense of God's justice. I think you're right. I think a finite amount of sins, for a finite period of purgatorial purging, like I think there's a philosophical logic there. The issue for me,
actually, you can here's the thing, JD. This is another thing I want to point out, because you can actually dogmatically affirm the existence of eternal hell while not positing that
anyone's in it.
Individual human is in that hell eternally, right? Yeah. Because all you have to do is to have an eschatology that is not a stasis, but a kind of an epixtasis, where you have the kind of further up and further in kind of Lewis kind of eschatology, and and you posit the idea that God, the business of God's creating persons, is not anything that ever is going to end. That God is going to continue to create persons.
It's just indefinite.
Exactly, indefinitely. God will always be creating persons, and if persons are persons, they're going to have free will, and they're going to have the possibility to fall into wrong. And there will always be persons who are in need of that kind of purgation.
So there might always be people in hell, but not forever. And hell rotates every 7 years to just sort of get a fresh perspective on. That's very interesting.
It's not original to me. I think Swinburne makes that argument.
Yeah. I think
also, but that's not where I get it though. I actually get it, the idea from Tomberg, who Tomberg doesn't quite make that argument though. What Tomberg's argument is that he says that he affirms the dogma that hell is eternal. But what he does is this. He says that eternal is not a temporal, it's just not a temporal term, like by its nature. It actually and an infinity of infinite duration is a kind of a bad infinity that actually can have nothing to do with the divine whatsoever. And that what eternity is a quality. So that the qualitative nature of the suffering of the soul that enters into the afterlife without an ounce of love, he says, is the quality of eternal torment.
Yeah.
Even if it's not actually an infinite duration of time. So,
yeah. No, I think universalism can give a decent account as any of the others of how God's goodness and justice work together. I think a question that I had, and this was the one me and David Artman struggled with on his show. Mm-hmm. And I say this, I don't think I'm a huge critic of universalism. I'm more just
I don't think you are at all.
Yeah, I'm not. I just find many different positions have interesting things to contribute, and I'm not sure.
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah. And maybe I'm just being a chicken or a coward. I don't know. But I think for me, the bigger issue, which I discussed on Artman's show, was how is God's goodness compatible with freedom, diversity, Trinitarian otherness, and these types of things that I also believe are part of the definition of good. And that gets into, I don't know if it has to be linked, but I think currently there has been a linking of universalism and a rationalist definition of nature. And I think that's not wrong, because voluntarism on its own is insane to me. It negates morality, it negates all this stuff. But also classical theism and a rationalist view of the cosmos and God and everything, to me, is also not very plausible. Because I think it's borderline monistic. I think it kind of negates the world of experience. And I think the view of God that I put forward in monotheism was a God who's paradoxically both of those things, right. Who is the classical theist God, but also has something of the will and freedom of more of a process God. And I don't know how to make sense of that. But apart from just sort of embracing that paradox,
no, it's Jesus actually one of the things I really
Jesus makes no sense to me. So
JD, yeah. Like one of my deepest theological intuitions has always been that classical theism and process theism are actually both partially right. And I thought your book did a really good job of showing like why we need both being and becoming, and why we actually can't account for reality at all without that paradox. And so I think it is a mistake to decide that it's all becoming or it's all being, and that you need to have both. And I think that Christology is the thing that gets us there. This is why I really thought it would be interesting to, and we can still do this at some point. I would like to get Jordan to read your book, particularly that portion of your book where you talk about the necessity, this necessity of God having a co-identity of both being and becoming in his Trinitarian nature. I think that actually ends up colliding with Jordan's work in an interesting way. And I've talked to Jordan about this too. So I know Jordan also is like very much is like, yeah, he's not all in on classical theism or process theology either. He's like, yeah. like us, he has this intuition that like, no, there's something that each of them is holding on to that's part of the picture, that in order to get the right picture, we need to try to integrate those things.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because I mean, I feel like almost all of the debates that people are having right now come back to these kind of basic categories that we're all using. And I don't pretend I like solved it with monotheism, but I think maybe because it was a popular level work, like it was written playfully, no academics ever read it. And I keep finding, I'm like, can you guys read this and then tell me if I'm crazy or not? Because I feel like this is a way forward.
I'm going to twist Jordan's arm and get him to. I've been wanting to have that discussion for a long time. So I'm going to see if I can twist Jordan's arm.
Twist it, man. I don't know. I think I need to do a deeper dive into Jordan's work as well because
I tell you,
this is like the fifth.
You read the whole mystery of Christ. I'll get Jordan to read monotheism, and then we'll have a talk. And it'll be great.
This is the first time. This is like the fifth time someone has told me that I need to that Jordan and I have this overlap. So
there really is. There's something happening there, and I've wanted to bring you guys into dialogue about it for a while, and so we'll have to do that someday. So this has been great as always, JD. Do you want to tell people? I'll make sure to put all the links in the description of the video, but do you want to tell people where they can find you and what you have coming up?
I think the easiest thing is jdlyonhart.com, JDLYONHART, just my name.com. That's got my books, my links, everything on there. I think if you want the podcast, the Spiritually Incorrect podcast, which I co-host with Steph Hart, we just do all sorts of crazy. People sort of ask, what's the theme? And I think the title is just the same theme. It's spiritually incorrect. It's whatever we feel like people don't want to talk about. We're just like, hey, let's talk about it. And so that might be universalism. It might be ghosts and the paranormal. We had Rupert Sheldrake on to talk about telepathy. So just whatever Christians aren't talking about, we're like, hey, let's talk about it. So check that out. That's just the Spiritually Incorrect podcast. And you can go to spirituallyincorrectpodcast.com or
I'm gonna have to go back and watch the Rupert Sheldrake episode. I missed that one. I love Rupert.
It was one of our first ones before, it was like our second or third episode. Yeah. So we started strong with him and then we've just never topped it. But I
saw you talk with Jordan. That was a good one.
Oh yeah. He did a great job kind of introducing the subject. So,
yeah.
And then, those are the main websites. And as for what I have coming up, the New Trinitarian Ontologies book, volume 1, is going to be coming out hopefully this fall, but and that's edited by John Milbank, Ryan Hacker, and myself. And so that's coming out I think we're hoping for the fall, but watch it be the spring because why not?
Right.
That's how publishing goes that way. And then my next book, Zeus Was an Atheist, an odd retelling of the Moses story. The manuscript was due August 1st. So I guess that'll probably be out in the spring as well. So
Zeus was an atheist. Looking forward to that one.
He was an atheist, the old dirty blader. So that makes me think of a joke that I have a Mormon friend, longtime Mormon. He's actually an atheist, but he was raised Mormon. And so I've always poked him about his atheism over the years in a friendly kind of way, loving, friendly way, poked him about his atheism. And one of the things I'll say that I have said to him is that, oh, yeah, but you were raised Mormon, so effectively you were always an atheist because just Mormon God just does not meet any coherent definition of God. It just doesn't. Because you're still left with the problem of why anything exists at all. And Mormon God doesn't help you explain that at all because he just used to be a dude like us that somehow got to be God. So yeah, I've got 2 Mormon missionaries who are coming to visit me every single week, like clockwork. Like I come in, I just sit outside now because I know when they're coming, and I've been really enjoying it. It's been fun going back and forth. And they gave me a Book of Mormon, and when they did that, I gave them the Journey of God. And I'm
there you go.
Here. And it brought me so much joy that they were giving me a book, and I'm like, here's a book back, because you want to give them the Bible, right? But they already read the Bible, right?
They already read the Bible. Yeah.
So no, I'm in self-promotion mode right now, and I I hate it. I feel gross about myself while I'm doing it, but I'm also just like, I don't know how to stop, man. How do you know, all these podcasts and like,
no, you got, hey, you know, you can't wait around for anybody else to do it for you. And I actually think you do yourself. I actually find, I see some of your self-promotion stuff. I think you do it in a very charming and endearing way. I don't, there are people that do self-promotion that, there are people that do self-promotion in an obnoxious way. I think you do it in a playful, delightful way, which reflects the spirit of the guy that you are and the kind of book that you wrote. This book is playful. It is personal. It's vulnerable, and it's a good read. And I recommend it to all of you. So please go out and buy The Journey to God in 6 Movements by J.D. Lyonhart, and there will be a description and a link in the video. All right.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
And I appreciated your thoughts on the book and your affirmation, you know, so thank you. That means a lot.
You're welcome. It's good to have you again, JD.